name is Marisa Jacobs, Managing Director of Xpatweb, the premium immigration and work visa provider in South Africa. I'm joined today by Mr. Mbhele, Director of Corporate Accounts for the Department of Home Affairs. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Marisa, for that warm introduction. It is always a pleasure to be here. As you would know, that this is a follow-up to our previous podcast that we had with regards to the changes in legislation and the regulation, the introduction of new visa categories. And as we had agreed in the last podcast, that at that time, some of the things that we'll be discussing today were just concepts. But legislation has since then been passed to actually put into action and in implementation those new introductions that were at that time just concepts. It is my pleasure to be here once again.
Fantastic. So in this session, we'll be focusing specifically on the remote work visa that came into effect last year. So perhaps let's first just talk about what is a remote work visa.
Yes, the remote work visa, Marisa, maybe before I even go into the remote work visa, it's I think this is a perfect moment that it comes at the time that we've just received the good news from the Henley Passport Index that the South African passport has moved 10% into the top 50 of the best passports in the world, which is, I think, quite exciting news, something to look forward to. And, really another feather in the cap for us as the Department of Home Affairs and obviously as the country. The remote work visa, as you are asking, in simple terms, it is a visa that is granted to people that would want to be conducting an activity of work for an employer that is abroad, but with the preference that they conduct such activities within South Africa.
And then this is now newly introduced for South Africa, but it's obviously been spoken about for quite some time. Perhaps you can elaborate for us a little bit about how this first came about and the journey that South Africa has been on to finally have the remote work visa now available.
Yes. You will recall, Marisa, that, especially during the COVID times, a lot of companies started to opt for remote work, whether that could be done locally with people, working from home and all the other interventions that had to come in during the COVID times. I think then it was at that time that the discussions started going around to say, would it be maybe a good idea for the immigration regulations and the immigration regimes of different countries to start introducing something that would allow for employees to be working remotely. And as I mentioned in the beginning at the start of our interview, that it first started as an idea, as a concept. You would remember there were different descriptions. Others would be referring it to as a nomad visa, referring to somebody that moves from one place to another, but then also performing some work activity too, for income purposes. And as the Department of Home Affairs, we started getting requests to say, was there or is there something like that in our legislation that allows us to be able to issue this type of visas? And when we went through our legislation, we were able to see that we did not have a specific visa that accommodates this type of population, especially after we had learned that it was a growing phenomenon. In other countries, really, they could even quantify the benefits of people that were working remotely in their countries. But also, some studies that were done also indicated that people who were working remotely also had an economic, contribution in terms of their expenditure in the countries where they would have preferred to work remotely. Now, having considered all those benefits, it is when then, as the department, we decided that this could be something that we could actually look into and try to find, a legislation intervention that would actually allow any person from any country who would want to be based in South Africa while performing work for their employer abroad. And that actually led us to coming to the decision that it is something that we need to introduce in our legislation.
Fantastic, yeah. So a massive economic benefit on the one side, introducing that and being able to attract foreign nomad workers to be able to do so from South Africa where they couldn't do so before. So that really is a great intervention that we're seeing. Perhaps then just a bit from a practical perspective. So what are those qualifying criteria that someone needs to meet to then be able to apply for a remote work visa in South Africa?
Okay. I will start from the legislation part of it. What we did is that we then had to amend our regulations so that we introduce this this type of a visa. And then obviously when we introduce any type of a visa, then it will be followed by the requirements to say what are the requirements that the potential applicant will need to fulfill. One of the requirements is that the applicant, obviously because it refers to the term work, and the general understanding is that when we speak about work, there will always be two parties involved. There will be an employer-employee relationship. So we would need proof that this person is gainfully employed. And the second thing would be that they should be earning a certain amount that we have prescribed to be the amount of money or a salary or income that they are earning per annum, which we have gazetted and published at 650 plus, I think 650, 700 and something rands per annum. So that would also be one of the requirements to say at least you should be earning within that, that salary level. And then obviously then there would be other requirements that would be requirements that would apply generally to all types of visas. You should have a valid passport. You should not have a criminal record. And, if maybe you've traveled through a country that, it has yellow fever, then you will need to have yellow fever certificate and so forth. But the most critical requirements would then be the ability to demonstrate that you are earning that amount per annum, and then also that you are gainfully employed. That would be in the form of a contract of employment to say this person is working for us, and they will be earning this amount of money while residing in South Africa.
Perfect. And then, of course, the addition that we saw added to the regulations when it was amended in the final version is then, of course, that you have to remain tax compliant, both locally in South Africa and internationally.
Yes, that is also one of the critical factors, because remember, if you are resident in South Africa for a certain period of time, then there's tax implications that come into the space to say you should then be contributing to to the fiscus. Our understanding is that SARS also as an entity, and obviously then representing South Africa, has also tax agreement with various countries and so forth, prescribing how citizens of a particular a country may be taxed and so forth. So that is also the input that SARS has given to us, and which will then determine when the person applies for the remote work visa whether they are tax eligible or not.
Perfect. Yeah. Now, as you mentioned, it's been newly introduced, only came into law in October 2024. We're now sitting at the end of January, so 3 months in. What has the uptake been? What has the interest been? Have we seen a significant number of foreign nationals seeking information, applying for this visa? And are we expecting a big inflow, especially mentioning the passport ranking? Do we expect that there's going to be a big inflow of, and has there already been to date a big inflow of remote workers?
Most definitely, Marisa. We anticipate that we are going to get a significant uptake of the visa. There's a report that was produced by a consultancy a firm called Buffer.com, where they indicated that, you know, there is still that desire for most of employees to be working remotely. I just read a report. It was a 2023 report. It's called the State of Remote Work, where they did, you know, an interview with around 3,000 participants who had indicated that the nature of work, in fact, even going forward into the future, most people would ideally be working, you know, remotely. The advantage for us here is that, and also what we want to put as a value proposition, is that instead of those people spending time in their country of origin, you know, performing their remote work, South Africa is open for them to, you know, to come into our shores and enjoy the beautiful country, the beautiful weather that we have, while they perform work for their employers.
I think off the back of that and your mentioning of Cape Town, there's a survey that just came out and it has ranked Cape Town as the #1 city in the world. It's by a UK publication, Time Out. It's their 7th survey. It's over 18,000 people who globally contribute to this survey, and they've ranked, Cape Town was last year #2, and this year it's ranked at #1. So very exciting for South Africa, and obviously we foresee that will impact also globally the desire for remote workers coming to South Africa. As a point of interest, does the Department of Home Affairs or government in general do anything to promote South Africa as a remote working destination to attract more remote workers?
Yes. And maybe if I may also comment on the, you know, on those the news that Cape Town has been voted as one of the, well, not one of, as the best country.
The #1.
Yeah,
yes.
the #1 country. It ties in with our observation. Whenever we receive queries about, I hear that South Africa is now offering a remote work visa and so forth, there will always be a question that follows that, you know, if you talk to the person that is inquiring, they would say, I want to go and stay in the beautiful Cape Town and so forth. So I think reports such as this really do give us a mileage in terms of our ability to attract, you know, potential remote work visas to South Africa. And also it adds on into our own efforts of positioning South Africa as, you know, the country that should be a country of preference, you know, for people that want to work remotely. We have been doing some tours, you know, in a number of countries. We started with India, and then we also did China as well, where we have been focusing on attracting tourists to our shores. But then as part of that, we also understand that a person that becomes a remote worker, you know, residing in South Africa, in a certain way also becomes a tourist, because then they get to, you know, to explore the country and see all the other things and that our country has to offer. And the multiplier effect is that then they are able to communicate their observation to, you know, to their families, to their friends and so forth.
Absolutely.
And, you know, it adds to the effort that we are putting as the department, together with the Department of Tourism, to say we are positioning South Africa as the destination of choice, whether it is for sports, whether it is for tourism, or even for work such as the remote work visa.
I think we cannot underestimate the power of word of mouth, and once we start attracting remote workers, the absolute knock-on effect it will have to attracting more and more remote workers. I think that wraps it up for me in terms of discussing the remote work visa, the benefits to South Africa, what it is in summary, and what the benefits are. Are there any closing comments from you, perhaps, that you would like to add to the discussion before we end off?
Yes, I would say that, you know, one of the things that we observed is that you would recall that we gazetted the remote work visa in October. That was also towards, you know, the festive season, the holiday season and so forth. And it might happen that during that period, not a lot of people, you know, would have gotten hold of the news and so forth. And hopefully, you know, as we start in this new year, we are going to see an uptake as we discuss more unpack about the the requirements, what the remote work visa is all about, and so forth. So we look forward to welcoming all the remote workers that are currently working in their countries to visit our shores and come and enjoy the beautiful country that South Africa is.
Thank you. Thank you to Mr. Mbhele. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you to the viewers and the listeners for joining. And for those who are interested in a remote work visa, we look forward to engaging with you. Please follow our channel for more insights and more information on remote work visas. Goodbye for now.
Tune into the Work Permit South Africa podcast and let us turn that maze into a clear path forward.